Welcome, young explorers. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. All right, let's just dive right in. Today, we're taking a virtual field trip through outer space. But to make it super easy to picture in your head, I want you to imagine our entire solar system not just as a bunch of empty, dark space, but as a giant, bustling city. Just like the city or town you live in, our cosmic city has a really bright downtown, cozy inner neighborhoods, massive sprawling estates on the outskirts, and yep, even its own local traffic. So, buckle up your seatbelts on our cosmic tour bus because we are about to explore the most amazing neighborhoods in the galaxy. Here is our field trip itinerary for today. We'll start right in the center with downtown, the mighty sun. Then, we'll check out the inner rocky neighborhood. From there, we'll head out to the giant gas estates. Fourth, we'll dodge some space rocks and snowballs. And finally, we'll take a close look at moons and artificial satellites. Let's get moving. Section 1. Downtown, the mighty sun. Our very first stop is the absolute center of our city. And you know, in this city, downtown is completely taken up by one massive glowing power plant. Yep, that's the sun. As our central star, the sun is totally the boss. It holds every single planet, moon, and rock in its powerful gravitational grip, making sure absolutely nobody goes wandering off into deep space. Now notice just how massive that central power plant really is. The sun accounts for a staggering 99.8% of the entire solar system's mass. To put that into perspective, imagine we gathered up everything in our entire solar system city, every single planet, every moon, every little rock, and put it all on a giant scale. If the whole solar system weighed 1,000 pounds, the sun would take up 998 pounds of it. Literally all the rest of us, Earth, Jupiter, all the comets, we just make up that tiny remaining 2 pounds. Kinda wild, right? Section 2. The inner rocky neighborhood. Let's move our tour bus out from that bright downtown glare and see how the rest of the city shapes up. Welcome to the dense inner city suburbs. Astronomers call these the terrestrial planets, but we can just think of them as the inner rocky neighborhood. So there are 4 houses on this rocky block, and they're all quite dense and have very few or completely 0 moons. First up is Mercury. It's the smallest planet and sits right next to the power plant with absolutely no atmosphere at all. Next door is Venus, which is often called Earth's sister planet. Then, of course, there's our home, Earth. We are at the absolute perfect distance from the sun for liquid water to exist, making us the only known planet to support life. And finally, Mars. It's famous for being the red planet because it's covered in iron oxide, which, by the way, is exactly the same stuff as the rust you might see on an old bicycle left out in the rain. Okay, young scientists, it is time for a quick review pop quiz. Mercury is physically the closest planet to the blazing sun, right? But Venus is actually the hottest planet in our entire city. Why do you think that is? I'll give you a second to think about it. Section 3. The giant gas estates. Leaving the rocky suburbs behind, we are now traveling much further out into the sprawling outer neighborhoods of our city. Welcome to the giant gas estates, home to the Jovian planets, which you probably know better as the gas giants. Now, you'll immediately notice some dramatic visual differences between our inner and outer city. The inner planets we just visited were small, dense, and rocky. But these outer planets, they are a totally different story. They are absolutely massive and made up almost entirely of gases like hydrogen and helium. Plus, unlike our quiet inner block, these gas giants have bustling, busy yards filled with dozens of moons and spectacular ring systems. Seriously, if you ever do a craft project at home to model the solar system using foam balls, you'd need tiny little beads for the rocky planets and giant melon-sized spheres just to represent these gas giants. Let's look at some fun facts for the 4 residents living out here in the gas estates. Jupiter is the largest of them all, and it sports the Great Red Spot, which is actually a massive swirling storm. Then there's Saturn, definitely the show-off of the neighborhood, famous for its incredible, complex ring system made entirely of icy chunks and dust. Next, we have Uranus, an ice giant that really does things its own way. And finally, Neptune. It's the farthest planet out, painted a beautiful deep blue, and it constantly gets whipped by extremely high-speed winds. Time for another pop quiz. Let's see who is paying close attention just now. Out of those massive outer planets we just drove by, which ice giant actually rolls around its orbit completely knocked over on its side? Think back to our tour. The answer is Uranus. It has a crazy 98-degree tilt, which means it practically rolls around the sun like a barrel instead of spinning like a top. How cool is that? Section 4. space rocks, and snowballs. You know, a true city isn't just made of big houses. There's also lots of traffic and, well, debris floating around in between. So let's shift our field trip's focus away from the main planets for a minute and look at the fascinating smaller objects zooming through our cosmic city. First up, we have comets. Astronomers actually use the simple everyday term dirty snowballs to describe them because, well, that's exactly what they are. They are literally clumps of ice, dust, and frozen gases. But here is the real magic trick. As these dirty snowballs travel from the freezing edges of town inward toward the hot sun, their ice starts to melt and vaporize. And that creates a magnificent glowing tail that streaks right across the dark sky. Next up are asteroids. Think of asteroids as the rocky rubble left over from when our city was first being built. Now, most of these rocky objects live together in a massive ring called the asteroid belt. This belt actually acts just like a giant highway divider right in the middle of our city. It sits perfectly between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, completely separating the rocky inner neighborhoods from the giant gas estates. But sometimes bits of that rocky traffic get a little too close to Earth. Let's walk through exactly what happens when a piece of space rock decides to pay us a visit. Step 1. It starts as just a small piece of rock or dust floating quietly in space. Step 2. It hits Earth's atmosphere really fast, and all that friction makes it burn up, creating a brilliant, bright streak of light. Scientists call this a meteor, but you probably know it as a shooting star. And finally, Step 3. If the rock is big enough that it doesn't entirely burn up and it actually hits the ground, it officially gets a brand new name. A meteorite. Section 5, Moons and Artificial Satellites. For our final main stop on the tour, let's pull the bus right back to our own home planet, Earth. We're going to look closely at the local traffic buzzing around our very own block, starting with our closest natural companion. Our moon is a natural satellite, meaning nature put it into orbit around us. But have you ever wondered why the moon appears to magically change shape over the course of a month? You know, sometimes it's a big, full circle, and other times it's just a tiny little sliver. These are called the phases of the moon. Now, the moon isn't actually changing shape, of course. We are just seeing different amounts of its sunlit side as it makes its revolution around the Earth. The changing shapes are really just a trick of the light. But the moon isn't the only thing circling Earth. We also have artificial satellites. These are brilliant man-made objects launched into space by scientists and engineers, and they directly impact your daily lives. Satellites like INSAT or IRS are up there right this second, monitoring the weather so you know if you need an umbrella, doing remote sensing to map the Earth, and handling communications. Literally, every time you watch television or your parents use GPS on their phones to find directions, you have these artificial satellites to thank. Okay, time to test your knowledge one last time before we park the bus. Think about what we just talked about. Is the shiny moon you see in the sky at night an artificial satellite or a natural satellite? If you said natural satellite, you are 100% correct. Artificial means human-made, like our weather monitors, while the moon is a natural celestial body. Now, before we completely wrap up, I know for sure some of you might be wondering, wait a second, what about Pluto? Wasn't that a planet? Well, let's revisit our cosmic city analogy one more time. Back in 2006, the International Astronomical Union decided Pluto didn't quite meet the rules of being a major planet. Why? Well, because a true planet has to be big enough to clean up all the space debris in its own neighborhood. Pluto is just so small that it hasn't cleared its neighborhood of icy rubble out there at the very edge of town. So scientists gave it a special new title, a dwarf planet. To officially conclude our field trip, I want to talk about how astronomers actually measure this giant city. The distances between these planetary houses are so incredibly vast that using regular miles or kilometers just doesn't work. The numbers would literally be too long to write down on a page. Instead, scientists use a special unit called a light year. This is simply the distance light can travel in one single year, which is a mind-blowing 9.46 trillion kilometers. I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. If the fastest thing in the entire universe, light, travels almost 9.5 trillion kilometers in just one single year, imagine hopping into your family's car and going standard highway speeds. How long do you think it would take you to drive to the edge of our cosmic city? The answer will absolutely blow your mind. The universe is incredibly vast, deeply beautiful, and it is just waiting for bright minds like yours to keep exploring it. Thank you so much for joining me on this field trip today. Keep looking up and always keep asking questions.